Okay, let's dive right in. We're exploring the science and, the really profound ethical debates around a new kind of genetic testing. We're talking about technology that claims it can help parents select an embryo, not just to avoid a disease, but to actually optimize for traits like height, eye color, and even intelligence.
And our story, it really begins right here, with this tiny bundle of cells, just 5 days old. It's about the size of a grain of sand. But inside it is the entire instruction manual. We're talking 6 billion base pairs of DNA that builds a totally unique human being.
So for a long time now, parents using IVF have had the option to screen embryos for serious single-gene diseases, things like cystic fibrosis. But there's a new technology that's starting to make its way into the mainstream, and it claims to go much, much further.
What's happening here is that this new field analyzes an embryo's DNA to try and forecast all these complex traits. It's a development that's literally taking the age-old debate of nature versus nurture out of philosophy books and plopping it right down into the fertility clinic.
So, the big question is, how does this all work? Is it something out of a sci-fi movie, or is this the real deal? Let's get into the actual science behind all the headlines.
The process itself is called PGTP. That stands for preimplantation genetic testing for polygenic traits. Here's the play-by-play. It all starts with IVF. Then a few cells are very carefully removed from each embryo. The DNA from those cells gets sequenced and then fed into these special algorithms that spit out a whole series of scores.
And the absolute core of this whole thing is what's called the polygenic risk score. Now, this isn't like a simple test for a single gene problem. No, this thing analyzes the super complex dance between hundreds, sometimes thousands of genetic markers. It then computes the probability of an embryo developing everything from diabetes to schizophrenia, or even having a high IQ.
But, and this is a big but, the scientific community is hitting the brakes hard. They're pointing to what you could almost call 3 fatal flaws in the science right now. First, the data is really biased. It's almost all from people of Western European descent, so it's way less reliable for other groups. Second, it completely ignores nurture. These scores can't factor in things like your environment or lifestyle. And third, the sample size is tiny. Its predictive power just nosedives when you're only looking at a few related embryos from one IVF cycle.
So even with all these scientific red flags, the train has already left the station. This technology started out with a pretty noble goal: preventing serious diseases. But, it's quickly expanding into some way more controversial areas. You can really see this mission creep in action when you look at the companies involved. The early players like Genomic Prediction and Orchid, they were all about tackling big, scary diseases like cancer and heart disease. But the newer kids on the block, companies like Nucleus and Horizite, well, they've jumped right into the deep end, offering selection for non-medical traits like height, personality, and, yep, even IQ.
And this slide, this just perfectly captures what that choice actually looks like. The source material says it's less like a Build-A-Baby workshop and more like you're shopping for a new character in a video game, complete with stat cards. You're handed this report card, ranking each of your potential children, and suddenly you're forced to make this unbelievably complex, life-altering decision.
And yeah, making that choice, it's not cheap. In fact, it comes at a seriously steep price. Just look at Nucleus Genomics. Their starting package, which includes IVF and the screening, is nearly $25,000. That puts it completely out of reach for most people.
So you can imagine, this big leap into choosing cosmetic and cognitive traits has set off a huge debate. It's a conversation that's hitting on 2 major points. Is the science even valid? And are we accidentally bringing back a really dark, disturbing ideology?
On one side, you have the proponents, like the founder of Nucleus Genomics. They basically frame this as a question of personal freedom. From their point of view, the technology is just a tool, giving people more information to make what they feel are the best choices for their own families. But the critics? They are sounding every alarm bell they can find. Scientists like Sasha Gusev argue that these companies are over-promising on science that just isn't proven for embryos. They warn that it could end up manipulating hopeful parents and leading to some really bad social outcomes.
And it's not just the scientists who are split. The public is too. I mean, check out this survey from 2024. A huge majority of people, they're totally fine with screening for physical diseases. Makes sense. But the moment you bring up something like intelligence, well, the consensus just shatters, with a huge chunk of people saying, no way.
What's really fascinating is that none of these ideas are actually new. They've been bubbling up for over a century. Right from the moment the word eugenics was first coined back in 1883, through those controversial twin studies in the 60s, and all the way to the Human Genome Project, which is really what unlocked the door for all of this.
So, that's the story so far. But where does this all go from here? Let's peek into the future and see how this could all lead to what some are calling a full-on reproductive revolution.
Okay, so there's this tech on the horizon called in vitro gametogenesis, or IVG for short. It's still in the lab, but the idea is to create sperm and eggs from, say, a skin cell. If that works, a couple could theoretically generate and screen not just a dozen embryos, but hundreds, maybe even thousands. Think about that.
And that possibility raises this pretty scary specter of what one advisor to a genetics company calls an evolutionary arms race. He basically predicts that as soon as the rich and powerful start doing this behind closed doors, everyone else is going to scramble to keep up, and the whole moral landscape could shift overnight.
When you boil it all down, this technology really forces us to look in the mirror and ask some huge questions. What kind of world do we really want to create? Are we okay with a future where some kids get a genetic head start and others don't? It really makes you think about the role that pure chance, serendipity, plays in our lives.
So the question isn't just about our past anymore. How much was destiny and how much was choice? The real question is about our future. How much of it are we willing to design? And maybe more importantly, who gets to hold the blueprint? The choices we're making about this technology right now, they're not just going to define our kids, they could redefine what it means to be human for every generation that comes after us.